right, it looks like we are live. 4 Secrets of Disruptive Product Launch. I'm here at Mr. Chris Morrison, Viverus Guru on startup product launches. We're going to get into secrets now. Like the secret, that book, The Secret. These are the four, the secret. And you never tell you, and then we never tell you what the secret is. We just have you watch for an hour. Well, and you never find out the secret. I hate that.
Well, we kind of step over them every day is kind of the problem. That's why they're secrets. We don't pay attention to them. So,
well, there are certain shows like Lost that was built totally on just giving you enough of the secret, but never telling you the true secret. Your head's spinning and you get very agitated. So, anyways,
I'm the opposite. I just give it all away.
Give it all away. There you go. Early and often. I like that. First and foremost, comments. We love getting comments, feedback, thoughts. So if you want to comment, make a comment, throw an idea out there, ask a question, don't hesitate to do that. We will enter it live in the conversation. If you have a dissenting point of view, we're okay with that as long as you do it respectfully. It's all about respect.
We actually love that. We love dissenting point of views.
Absolutely. Why not? Because we get different learnings associated with that.
Absolutely.
So what we're going to talk about today, why well thought out product launch development developed by smart and well-intended professionals almost certainly leads to failure. Okay, that's one. Why investing in a lottery ticket is better bet. Wow, that's interesting. The guy in California who won his $1 billion, he certainly did that. The one fundamental change or secret required to start with a fundamental secret. So we'll talk about that. And then 3 other secrets, but ultimately why a truly disruptive product, those tactics of complicated planning are wrong and break down. So, Chris,
David,
I'm going to throw it at you.
Yes.
Why is this an absolute certainty that your current product launch tactics will lead down a path of failure? Why? What's going on here with absolute certainty?
I know that's pretty bold, I guess, or it's absolute. I guess it's
absolute is absolute. Absolute zero.
Absolute.
Absolutely stupid. Absolutely crazy. Those are absolutes, baby.
So here's the challenge with the way we typically launch products, David, and how we sell products, because the way we launch products is the extension of how we tend to sell products. And what's different when you're launching a disruptive technology, and the fundamental thing, the thing that makes us go off track is this idea of assumptions. Mm-hmm. And when we're launching a disruptive technology, and the more disruptive it is, the more it's based on assumptions. And then when you build a launch plan around executing a launch, what we quickly, and it's funny, we even write our at the beginning of every revenue projection for a product launch, you list out all the assumptions behind the plan. But then as soon as we write the plan, we kind of throw the assumptions out and act like that plan's real and then start executing it.
So like the financial planners, you have to have that little letter that says this is just a plan. Nothing can really happen. You never know what's going to happen and you may lose all your money.
Yeah, exactly. But then just like in that scenario, then we forget that line at the beginning. We act like the plan's real. And
that's right.
And we start executing it. But this is why it's almost certain it's going to fail. So when you start executing that plan, what happens is we bump up against these assumptions, many of which are wrong, and that's what throws us off track. And because of the way we're wired and the way we go about business these days and having to drive results, is that we execute that plan and don't look back and inquire into those assumptions.
All right, so assumptions.
And that's why to me it's almost an absolute certainty.
So the absolute is that assumptions are going to absolutely take you down the wrong path, because assumptions by their very nature are not absolute.
Now you're messing with me, Dave.
But it's true. So assumptions by their very nature.
And well, let's step back a step. By definition, a disruptive product is disruptive because we've never done it before. Yep. Right. And then secondarily to that is then any planning we do around have to be assumption based, right? And then when we start operating like the plan is real, then those assumptions come back and bite our ass. And that's why it's almost, and this is why repeatedly we see product launches go off track, but not so much go off track because inevitably a product launch or a disrupt product is not going to go as planned.
All
But
right, that's it.
the challenge inside of that is we keep acting like the plans should be working and we keep executing the same plan instead of going back and saying, okay, what in our plan, what are the assumptions of our plan that were wrong that have taken off track, and then address those.
Yes.
So that's
Gotcha.
the reason. But so
Agilists know this well. The plan is only a plan until you get hit in the face. You know, we hear
Yep.
this all the time as well. But from a product management perspective, you're right. They don't necessarily think along the same lines that a lot of these agilists are thinking now.
But here's the other thing about that, David. We all, so at some level we know it, and we know, and we all hear those terms. As soon as you get engaged, Steve Blank. The first time you engage in the market, that's when your plan goes to shit.
Yeah,
goes off track. So we know that, but then how? Okay, so what do we do different? That's what the secrets are about, right? What do we do different to methodically and scientifically address that from the get-go and not and plan for getting hit in the face? And what do you do in the face of getting hit in the face?
Yeah, it's almost like it's got to be expectations, not a plan. It's expectations. This is what I expect. This is what I expect. And maybe that's too heavy of a word too. There's got to be some way of saying.
I think a great way to think about it is this is my hypothesis, because as soon as you say here's my hypothesis,
too fancy of a word for business people.
What's
I'm
that?
looking at it's too fancy of a word for business people, right? We're talking about connotation and denotation. So what we're going to talk about, the first secret is discovery, right? So what you have to do is you have to figure out a way, and I stole your thunder. Chris is going to talk to you about discovery mindset over execution mindset. Really execution.
That's actually the third secret, David.
No, it says secret number 1, act with understanding of entering the unknown. We don't know. We still have to figure out. We have to discover.
The first secret, David, before you even get to discoveries, we have to grapple with we don't know what we don't know.
Holy crap, you're going off script now. I got my papers in front of me and you just zapped me. Really? All right, unknown unknowns is what an adaptive leader would call them. So your first secret then is telling people you have to understand that there is such a thing as unknown unknowns, that you can't hide from unknown unknowns. You have to try to figure out unknown unknowns.
Yeah, but the first step in getting to unknown unknowns, David, is realizing we're dealing with the unknown. This is hard, and this is important because salespeople. So one of the hardest thing for a salesperson to say, because of the way they're training, and this is everybody, is I don't know.
Yeah.
If you're launching a new product, you should be saying that all the time. Okay, and it should be like.
But then there's got to be answer to that. See, what people don't like, I don't know, is they assume that's just a scapegoat. So, as it relates to secret number 1, I don't know, but this is what I'm doing about it. I don't know. This is what I'm doing about it. I don't know.
Dave, I'm going to fight with you here a little bit.
I can, but what else you can do? I just don't know and stop.
So you don't go directly from I don't know to this is what I'm going to do about it. Then you have to inquire in what's missing, or what don't I know, or what of my assumptions that I build around them are incorrect. Okay, and now.
So I'm going to revalidate my assumptions.
Correct.
There you go. So you're still going to do something. This is what business people get concerned about with the word I don't know.
It's a context of the unknown is the initial context you have to operate with. And so in the context of an unknown, yes, then there is the reevaluate assumptions. It's not like, okay, we got to go sell more, we've got to go hire more reps, we got to change our messaging. No, that's not the way it is. You got to step back and say, okay, what am I planning? What are the assumptions of my planning? And that fundamentally is coming from a place of we don't know and we have to discover instead of executing, right? Which is jumping out.
Don't know and we have to discover. Okay. And so I'm looking at this. My 2024 plan is 2 salespeople and a new leader because I want to expect to get this amount of revenue.
Yep.
Within the first 6 months of getting in there, I'm seeing my execution is failing.
Yep.
Nothing's happening.
This is a real situation you're dealing with, or is this
it could very much be. That's what I have a plan for that, for rolling out a new division into a new marketplace. It's not a disruptive marketplace, but it's a new marketplace. It'll be disruptive for us.
Sure. Yep.
All right. So what type of information do I give my leadership when I'm halfway through this is what I said, but I have to go back and say, well, I have a discovery problem. How do you articulate that in business terms?
It's a good question. Let me think about that one for a second. You step back and say whether our goals, what are we trying to accomplish? Okay. And then go back into the plan that you laid up the plan and figure out where in the plan you've gone off track. What's the critical step in the process to where we're trying to achieve, where we went off track? And that's what you have to focus in on. What's that critical moment? It may be going all the way back to the beginning and assessing who the customer, who we assume the early customer is going to be. We may not, the customer we thought was going to be the buyer of our technology is not motivated by.
So you got to take a stop. I got to take a stop and say my revenue's not matching up to my expectations. So I'm not going to drive this plan anymore because it doesn't work.
Correct.
So now I have to go back into discovery phase. So we're going to have to recast expectations of revenue to figure out next steps.
Yeah, but David, if my recommendation is this, and you just said it, and this is our mind thinking. I have to go back in the discovery phase. But this is getting back into operating, that we're going into the unknown, and we got to be operating from discovery from the get-go. You said it in your languaging. I've got to go back. No, we've got to set the stage where this is a discovery process, period.
Well, that's what I'm ultimately getting at, and this is going to be the biggest challenge, is that part of the process of going to execute on something like this, the stage and the plan has got to be discovery.
The stage and the plan. So the first step is figuring out, okay, that we're going into the unknown, and there's going to be there's a lot of uncertainty. There's going to be paths we go down to that aren't going to be productive. So it's almost like when you say that we're failing, it's yes. Instead of having that be a problem, it becomes yes. Okay,
but in the business sense, it is a problem. That's the problem. The business mindset is
correct.
This isn't working. So they have to be able to change the business mindset.
But going into the unknown, when you're going into unknown, your discovery mindset, learning that something doesn't work is not the problem. It doesn't occur as a problem. It occurs as a learning moment that then allows us to reassess our strategies and our tactics to adjust appropriately to things that we learned through the first step of that process.
And
so in that context, that it shifts from being a problem to the failures are huge value when you're launching a disruptive product. They're just as valuable, probably might be more valuable than the positives or the things that go right out of the gate.
And then how long in this process, where do you think in this discovery process, and we got to get to secret number 2 here shortly, but this whole discovery process, you end with, if you don't do this, this is part of the whole innovation death spiral, which we talked about in the previous session, which you can go take a look at. But, when do you say dead?
When what?
When do you say dead? This that ain't going to work.
When do you say dead? Well, most of the time, 90% of the time, if you've done your early homework, you're not dead. You just hit either a bump in the road, a brick wall, or you went down a blind alley that you got to retract your stuff out of and start down a different alley. So
doesn't your discovery process give you the chance to say it doesn't work?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, that you're actually looking for those moments. You're looking at, is this working? Is that not working? But most of the time, a product's not dead. Most of the time, in the discovery process, you reassess, you reevaluate, and you go down and you find a path. But the key to this, Dave, is when you're in the discovery mode, you go through that learning process a lot faster. When you're in a execution mode, which most companies are when they're launching products, they don't go through this learning process. They get stuck in this mindset, something's wrong, instead of, wow, we just learned something that doesn't work. How do we then leverage that knowledge to go down the path that's going to be successful? So that keep pushing to execute and keep pushing more and more to stay on plan, hit revenue. Actually, that's what continues to create the failure instead of the learning necessary to get the success.
Yeah. So I would tell you from my experience, I actually like getting failure. I wanted to make the failure decision as early in the process as possible. So instead
Sure.
of because I didn't want to keep working on something that ultimately isn't going to work. And I think a lot of people
Yeah.
do that, and that's part of the plan. They just keep rolling the plan without saying it's dead. Stop.
But
No mas.
on the flip side of that, Dave, a lot of products fail in the marketplace that should not fail
Yeah, I
because
get
they're
that,
not
but
going
that's
through this
if you're
process.
not doing the but if you are doing the
If
discovery
you're doing the
process,
discovery, the design of the discovery mindset is to create experiments and learn quickly and kill the
if it's
things
going
that
to work or
don't
not,
work
yeah.
and follow the things that do work. But that's more of a methodology that we can get into that.
Yeah, the method. That's where my brain was thinking about the lean startup
Sure.
methodology. Let's go into secret number two.
So
Secret number two.
and these are all wrapped together, but and it's wrapped into the things that you and I are talking about, but it's what I call the decision framework that you have to operate from. And I picked this up, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. I was doing some reading and some research, and I learned about this gentleman by the name of David Snowden. He was at IBM at the time. He came up with this decision framework called Kinevan, and it's different decision frameworks depending on the complexity of the problem. When you're in the execution mode, like you are with incremental products, you operate in a framework that David refers to as complicated. And this is where you can, this is for an incremental product with the right knowledge, basically someone that's done it before, there's expertise on launching new products, can lay out a plan from 1 to 3,632 on how to execute, and pretty much can execute to that. That's in a complicated model. What we're doing with disruptive technology or disruptive products or truly innovative products is we shift into this framework that he refers to as complex versus complicated. And it's what you and I are talking about. It's this, you cannot lay out a plan from 1 to 3,632 and expect to follow that plan, because as soon as you get 5 steps into it, you uncover an assumption that was incorrect that's going to take you in a completely different direction. So you have to do it incrementally, and you have to take the learnings along the way, and based on those learnings, keep building out the model. What do I mean by that?
Yeah.
First, you have to figure out who your early customer is first before you can figure out what the messaging is to reach that customer. You got to figure out the messaging in before you can create your lead generation engine effective. Now, if you look at marketing program for product launch, marketing comes up with all their language and their messaging and their tactics for launching and doing lead generation right out of the gate. And they may be going after the wrong customer with in the wrong segment of the marketplace, which means that all that's going to fail. But that's not the way they think about it.
Okay.
So
complicated versus complicated versus complex. Complicated.
So you have to shift from this mindset. And if you think about it, the complicated is the execution mindset. The complex, where you have to learn and build on those learnings along the way, is the discovery. It's that shift from that complicated from that execution to that discovery mindset you'd have to make.
And the concept we talked a little about is this concept of unknown unknowns.
Yes.
Assuming and understanding that there are unknown unknowns before you enter into this situation, which is an important part of the mindset change.
Yes.
What are some of your steps in the complex decision-making process? If you had to give people a couple steps, how do you help them begin to make that change when they need to? Because there are situations where you just follow a complicated process.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Disruptive isn't the case, but that's not like that process isn't bad or good. It is. No, it can be used for certain things, right?
It's good in the appropriate situations, just like the complex framework is good in the right situations.
So I think people get confused by this. I think when we start talking about unknown unknowns, they start thinking that we're saying everything you do now is an unknown unknown.
No.
You're really focusing in that anything you do in disruptive product launch, you got to consider as unknown unknowns.
So when you're doing a disruptive product launch, where you're bringing a product to market that the market hasn't seen before, that's a fundamental shift in how you manage something or do something, or you're taking a product into a brand new market, that's disruptive. And when you're doing that, you're doing something that technically, no, literally hasn't been done before.
So that means if you have to follow that complicated mindset process as part of your framework. Okay.
Or you end up with the Innovation Death Spiral, which we talked about.
So the first kickoff meeting, everybody gets around and says, we're doing a disruptive product launch. All of you have to say, yes, you understand that this is a unknown situation. We're going to follow a complicated mindset process.
And you build a go-to-market strategy that's built around not executing a full product launch. You build execution strategies that's built around doing early experiments to tease out.
But everybody has to say yes to that, like you do when you have to sit in front of the exit row and you say yes to opening door. You got to actually hear them say yes, so that they don't try to hide from it and say ultimately, oh, I didn't hear that. I want to go back and use my own. Because you're going to have marketing people involved. You're going to have product marketing people involved. You might have some sales trainers involved.
Yep.
All these people
leadership. This is what we're talking about today, Dave, and the secrets are mind shift changes, conceptual, principle-based changes. And to get those, to go into a large organization that doesn't have this and try to execute this without getting leadership buy-in, it won't work. And for me, the best customers are entrepreneurs that have done this before, that have struggled through it before, and I go and I start talking to them, and we start talking about the challenges and the stories of the challenges they've run into, and all the time I've had them say, "Oh wow, I experienced that," and then we start talking about now they're ready to maybe open their mind up to a different way of looking at these things, and that's where you have to have the mind shift. I mean, I have a good friend that I'm working with that works in a huge company, and we talk about this all the time, that his company may not be ready for this. Mm-hmm. We talk about strategies of things that we can go into his company and do to take small steps in this mind shift.
Yeah, it's part of the trend. That's when agile transformation looked at. The most successful one started with smaller subsets of the organization doing it, teaching and enrolling and looking at positive execution. The downside of that is that they might just see that group as being a bunch of weirdos, and it doesn't go beyond that group. There's so many dynamics involved. It's all about people, mindsets, ways of working dynamics that have to be broken as part of this process. So,
here's the problem, David. If you don't make this mind shift, like we said at the beginning, it's almost guaranteed failure. If you're trying to do something,
again, you gotta. Here's this kid. You're right. You believe that. Your belief is that now because you've seen it. The problem is people don't believe. We have to find ways to get that belief. Once that belief happens, then you'll see the behaviors and actions that constitute following this type of mindset.
Right.
So the mindset aspect. I stole the thunder for secret 1, I guess. I got confused. But secret 3 is.
I don't even know what's secret 3.
Discovery. The mindset itself.
The mindset itself, and it's a mindset.
Where's your paperwork? Where's your notes?
They're all over the place. I'm always all over.
All right, so the discovery mindset.
But David, this is really important because this mind to really grasp this and garner the impact that true disruption can be for a company and a product. These mind shifts, these changes, the shift of realizing we're going into the unknown. We're going to break ourselves up to do that. The shift from complicated decision making to complex and learning as we go. The shift from execution to discovery. These shifts have to happen for people to be able to take it, for companies and people to take advantage of these opportunities.
So to kind of think about this a little bit, researchers will operate this way, but the difference between the difference between this though being a research orientation and the agile market entry mindset is that while you're doing your research, you're going to be willing to sell.
Yeah.
See, research is just research, but when you're discovering, you're looking for avenues that you can ultimately get to a sale. And how the sales process.
Dave, this is beautiful that you point that, because if you look at sales from a research standpoint, and this is brilliant, revenue becomes evidence of something. It does not become the goal.
Yeah.
then the question is, what are you trying? What is the research trying to get you to? What is the discovery trying to get you to? If it's not revenue, what is it?
What we discovered at a previous organization, we discovered an opportunity, and then we took that opportunity and tried to build a repeatable sales process around it, and it failed. So it was interesting that, we did discovery, researched it, we found this opportunity, we turned it into a sale, and then we looked at it. We thought we could repeat it, and maybe we didn't keep iterating enough.
Yep.
But we ended up not being able to repeat off of that very well done discovery process to find this opportunity.
But that's the definition of a discovery process, David.
Yeah.
And a sequential incremental discovery process, you can run into roadblocks anywhere along the way.
Yeah, it was interesting. We just,
here's the other thing on that. You cannot have a scalable, profitable business without a repeatable sales process.
Oh yeah, you could have a lifestyle business.
Yeah, but you still got to. I mean, I've got a lifestyle business in my consulting. I still have to create a repeatable sales process.
No, not necessarily. I coach a lot of these companies, as you know, and a lot of them, they're scalable. Their repeatable process is referral. I mean, they don't. It's like the organic marketing method.
Yeah, right.
I mean, a true repeatable sales process is I can stick additional resources in, and it will work.
Correct.
And so that's where we tried that, and it didn't go.
Yeah.
But we discovered it. The interest was amazing. It made logical sense for others to do it, but when we tried to repeat it,
it wasn't repeatable.
Repeatable.
Why wasn't it repeatable, David?
I don't know. No, we didn't do enough iterations to continue. Now we did iterate one way, and they're trying it. The barrier to entry was cost. It was costly. Yep. So they're testing out a new method of doing what the discovery showed with less cost.
Okay.
The sales cycle is long, though. That's part of the process.
That's challenging.
And that turns off entrepreneurs. Remember, I mean, that's you try to put a repeatable sales process in, and it's long. There's a turnoff there, especially especially bootstrapped or seed entrepreneurs, because that's unless an entrepreneur is actually building a product that they're going to build and try to sell so somebody else sells it. But that's a whole other.
Yeah, but even then it has to get the repeatability to be successful.
Well, you sell it to the other company and make them have to do that. You show that, you make them believe that the product, can be sold repeatedly.
Right.
And then they buy into it, and they're stuck. They bought it with a bunch of money. They bought this thing, and they're got to figure out if they can do it or not.
Yeah, David. But in the med tech world, the big buyers, the big acquirers have figured that out too.
But remember, you're going to digiceuticals. You're going to app-based solutions that are going to have some of this scenario in it.
Yep.
That's the thing that this world's going to. That's why I think this world is so ripe for a massive disruption. Because if you go to digiceutical and it doesn't impact the human body, like you don't enter the human body, then you don't have to go through all of that risk to open up opportunity. And that's what's really interesting to me about it. Now, you still have to do 510s and stuff like that, but I don't know. I think they're going to I think the government's going to give pathways for the digicide as long as it doesn't affect the body. That will make them be able to go into the market faster, which will cause a disruption.
Well, sure. But also, if you look at that world, they've had trouble getting to scalability too up to this point. Now we're going through a shift there, but all markets, when they launch, they go through that early hype and boom and bust type of thing.
Yeah.
And now we're kind of getting into digital health 2.0 or 3.0, whatever you want to call it, where they're starting to build viable companies around viable business models. But that's just the evolution of a new hyped market. So I think there's a huge opportunity there.
Well, look at weight loss. You have weight loss pills, and then you have Noon. Noon takes a digiceutical mindset, basically processing CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, into a package that can enable you to lose weight. And it's proving to be much better than Weight Watchers, Nutrisystems, or all these other things. Anyways, let's go to the fourth secret.
So the fourth one, if you look at the sequence of events, it's an old friend we've talked about before, but the fourth secret is, and we touched on this a moment ago, the shift from revenue as the goal to time to scale becomes the goal. That is the big prize, is getting to scale efficiently and quickly. And this is where the pushback from management on how do you report to management that the path we're on isn't working. We got to reassess and kind of backtrack a little bit when they are looking for results. Well, if you look at the data and you look at the results, when we do this execution model, what we end up doing, Dave, is we premature scale, and we slow down our path to profitability and scalability, which means ultimately what we're doing today over and over again, even though it's undistinguished as such, is we're overspending and under delivering over and over and over again with these product launches. So, I mean, I get that management's going to push back because of their antiquated thinking on this stuff. But the fact is, we're burning through so much money and we're wasting so much time. And many times we're not even ever getting to scale with these products, that it's time to start doing, if you look at the data, we should stop asking for our leaders that are trying to do this stuff to validate and should take a hard look at ourselves and say, what we're doing is failing.
Yeah.
It's failing miserably. We've got to start trying something different.
Time to scale as a KPI. That's what Kelly says. Great thought there. Thank you, Kelly, for sharing that. It's absolutely true.
Kelly, I think that is the key one. And that's, so people ask me, what's the North Star for launching a product? And that is it. How long does it take us? How long does it take us with respect to time and capital to get to scale? And what I can tell you is, if you take a discovery mindset and you go through this learning process, two things happen. One is we don't premature scale. So instead of building out the team and building out our sales and marketing engine, we build a team that's going to learn agilely, quickly, and learning, which means it keeps our early costs down. We're not going to go out to the huge shows right out of the gate. We're going to, build little experiments to test our messaging, test our entry point into the marketplace, test our pricing models, test our sales, test our adoption models.
Yep.
And learn, so one is we scale back on our early expenses as we're going through this learning stage. That has a huge impact on burn for an early product, number one. And then number two is, by focusing on the learning, we shorten the time. We shorten the time from launch to scale, instead of when we're focused on execution and not learning, we actually lengthen the time to scale. Many times never even getting to scale, because
most times never get to scale and burning a bunch of cash at the same time.
Exactly. And companies wonder why they keep failing at this and why it doesn't work. And they blame it on, the companies they bought. They blame it on the technology. They blame it on the marketplace.
Yep.
But the blame's in the wrong place most of the time. It's how do we go from launch to scale? And Kelly, you're dead on. That becomes the North Star KPIs. How fast? Now, and I love talking about that, there's incremental KPIs before that. So because, we talked about in a complex decision framework, there's KPIs all the way along the way that we have to go through to get from launch to scale.
Or stop. I got to keep saying, or stop.
Or stop. Absolutely.
And start another discovery process in another area or pivot. I got to reinforce. Personally, I got to reinforce that, because that's the biggest mistakes I have always made in this process, has been not stopping soon enough.
Yep.
And that's when I learned that, I became much more successful. And having, again, we're getting to the framework of lean startup, but having mechanics to be able to see that,
correct,
and then keep moving forward, for sure.
But I also think, David, if we do this learning discovery process well, we won't stop nearly as often as we do. Some products, some things will stop earlier or much quicker.
Then I would say you're not testing enough. I say you're not going after the disruptive market enough.
Oh, there's no doubt about that out there. People.
Then if you go more, Black Swan will tell you to go after as many as you can to find a lightweight discovery process that you can, fine tune and get at more so you can launch more.
Oh, absolutely. This is where innovation lives. This is where profits live. This is where market share gain lives.
Yeah.
Is in disruption. It doesn't live in incremental.
Because nobody, how many times I have done this, 20% success rate, 20%.
Yes.
I'm telling you, I could go over 15, 20 years of launching almost 500 products, many of them disruptive, definitely in the training and the learning space, but man, 20%.
Yeah, well, so the success rate, but David, this is still the hardest thing in business. This is the most risky thing to do in business, period.
Oh yeah, but I had to, or else I die as a company. It was mandatory.
I'm not saying not to do it. I'm saying
I'm saying that
inherently it's the riskiest thing to do. So yeah, we should expect high.
But I was able to do that because I really lowered the cost of test, and I could test it. Now, did I get pressure to try to do more smarter? But I just think there's not enough smart people to tighten the discovery process before you attack it. I think the discovery process should happen with multiple ideas.
You have to have enough. You have to have enough shots on goal to get it to go. But a lot of the shots that we're missing with, we should be hitting with today, and a lot of the shots we're taking today, we should not be even taking.
Yeah, and that's in your industry. Your industry, you have a strong belief that there's a lot of products sitting in a warehouse somewhere that would have sold if they did this right.
There's no doubt in my industry, but I think that's not just my industry, David.
Well, my scenario is nice to know versus need to know. There's a little bit different dynamic, and there's less cost to set up. So there's been anyway, we could talk through that. But the long story short, you have these 4 secrets of a disruptive product launch.
Yep.
Anything you want to share before we close out, Mr. Chris?
Yeah, a couple things, Dave, real quick. One is just good to be back.
Good to be back. Where did you go?
It's good to be back after the summer break. The other thing is I'm really excited about what we've got lined up for the fall. Next one we're going with is when product launch goes off rails, stories from the trenches. Just the opposite of what we're talking about today. There'll be all stories. What went wrong and how we can get them back. These are real stories from my work. And then I'm going to start bringing on other guests this fall as well.
Woo!
Marketing, reimbursement, some clients, just talking about their stories and that type of stuff. So
excellent. Smart idea, Mr. Chris. I love it.
That's it for today.
All right. Thank you all. Peace out.
Adios. Thank you.